Paul, could you explain what's happening in the government at the moment so that the students can understand the sort of headlines of what's happening? It's very difficult, I know.
Well, that sounds simple. The government is a sort of grand coalition. Germany's got one as well. It's as if the Republicans and Democrats, in the name of emergency, put themselves together and decided to run the country. It's a very bad idea because everything gets very murky and unclear. And left or progressive is not separated from right and Republican in any way. We have two very interesting figures who dominate the news in these months. One is called Enrico Letta, who is the Prime Minister, and I suppose we'd have to call him a moderate Christian Democrat. He's a Catholic person, and he seems extremely level-headed and very calm, reassuring, and doesn't do anything as Prime Minister. And then we have another figure who is the head of the strongest single party, who is also simultaneously secretary of that party and mayor of this city. I mean, I think it's fairly scandalous that he occupies both roles simultaneously. He's called Matteo Renzi, and he also is a moderate Christian Democrat. I ought to say that neither of these are labelled as such. They're both supposed to be men of the left, but there's not much left there. And I don't think we'll see many reforms in terms of the social structure or the things that I've been outlining today. The people who are in the government and in the news, in the political news, are absolutely incapable of changing. They're not strong enough, and they don't really want to tackle nepotism, clientelism, and all the rest. Enrico Letta, his uncle is Berlusconi's closest advisor, and he's supposed to be against Berlusconi. So they're all part of that very complicated network, which means continuity and not change. So watch out for those two. The moment is Matteo Renzi. He can do no wrong, the most popular man in Italy. He says he's going to radically change all the political system. The old politicians in his party are going to be sent away. Let's wait and see. I'm very skeptical. Yes?
You just made a very profound analysis of contemporary Italian society and the government. You mentioned the corruption.
Yes.
And I don't know how much you know about China, where I come from, but people in China also make these comments nowadays there are corruption and we are making changes, but what do you think of the Chinese government? Do you have a comment or opinion?
Yes, I do have a comment, and I'm most grateful for that question, because I think the comparison is extraordinarily interesting. I'd have to say immediately that China is the most dramatic economic success story. I mean, everybody knows that. And much more so than the Italian in the period when it was booming, after the Second World War. But there's a fundamental difference between the two countries, and that, of course, is that China is a one-party state, and that China is ruled by the Communist Party, by the Central Committee of the Communist Party, and that is not the case in Italy. We may be very dissatisfied with Italian democracy, I am, as I think you've gathered, but that's nothing compared to dictatorships, either of a party or of a person. Because all political power, as far as I read it, but I don't think it's just me, is concentrated within a single party, the room for corruption in China is immense. And also, it has to be said, for families. I mean, some of the stories of the enrichment of the leading figures of the Chinese Communist Party, denounced in all sorts of articles and so on, is really staggering. I mean, it's corruption on a scale that the Italians can't equal, and the Italians are pretty good at it, they're past masters at it. There's no question about that's nothing compared to what's come. Because if you have the same party in power from 1949 onwards, and you have no elections in which you could get rid of those people, then you've got the ground absolutely made for autocratic government, nepotism, clientelism, and the family. Here's the comparison: the family is so strong in China and so strong in Italy, and that's a lovely path to pursue if anybody's interested. Yes.
Talking about corruption, you caught a quick glimpse of a slide that you didn't comment on.
No,
I think it was
the labels.
the garbage.
Oh
labels.
yes, I know. Yes.
So I'd like to hear what you had to say now.
But, yes, not very much. I just thought it was another example of the state not working.
Right.
This is local government. It's in a very difficult city, Naples. I mean, anybody who tries to govern Naples deserves a gold medal before they start. And they can't manage it, and they can't get rid of the garbage. They have done now, but it's like in a Simpson cartoon, it might pop out of the green in the golf course, the rubbish can come up, who knows what they've done with it, where they put it, or how it's going to reappear. And there are terrible, terrible stories of the mafia getting polluted waste and burying it, and the local population not knowing anything about it, and the incidence of cancer 300–400% higher than anywhere else. That's the deadly fork. It's a terrible story, and it means that forces, malevolent forces in society, are not controlled. So all I wanted to say is there was that archive in Calabria, there's garbage in Naples, and it's all part of the same very sad story. And I doubt whether Leto or Renzi will be able to do anything about it. Yes?
Professor, I'm just curious or interested in your opinion about the failure of the state with respect to the fact that after the unification of Italy, most Italians weren't Italian as a nation.
Yes.
So you had the Papal States, Kingdom of Two Sicilies, and all these republics in the north who had nothing to do with each other.
Yes.
Do you think that has something to do with the general distrust of the national government?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. It takes me back beyond 1943. And no, I wanted to do that.
I think it's still relevant.
I was very worried about China. I think it is very relevant. But not so much because they were different states, but because the Italian state failed to do anything about those problems. I mean, when you see, let's go back to 1860, the unification of Italy. There are two ways forward, two ways you can take that unification. Either you go hell-bent on centralization, so that Rome controls everything, or you go the line of federalism and decentralization and relative autonomy. And that's the line that some wonderful major Italian thinkers like Carlo Cattaneo wanted the nation. That was where they wanted it to go in 1860. The centralist view triumphed absolutely, with huge numbers of new laws regimenting the whole way in which the citizen, Italian citizen, was going to live his relation or her relationship with the state. So the chance to have local traditions respected. For instance, in Lombardy, communes were very small, and the power of the citizen to control the local government was very big. And Cattaneo said, please leave our communes as they are. They're the most advanced exercises in local democracy in Europe. This is in the north, around by Milan. Don't touch them. Don't centralize everything. What did they do? They said that no commune can be less than 300 people. So that was the first thing that ruined, a centuries-old tradition. Second thing they said was that you had to follow the Piedmontese model. You know, the conquest of power by the Piedmontese army meant that Piedmontese law was inflicted on the whole of the rest of the peninsula. So the traditions of the south and the traditions of Lombardy and so on were discarded in the name of regimentation, a lot of rules and regulations, no autonomy. And that the absence of federalism in Italian history is what led to this horrible movement called the Lega, which actually got quite a lot of support because it was saying, more autonomy, please, which of course there should be, and isn't. It will come now. The tide has turned. It will come. The regions are powerful. Lots of people in Florence would like to have a new Grand Ducato della Toscana. You know, everybody goes back to a Tuscan state, because there was a Tuscan state. But it wouldn't be, my views, it shouldn't be with a great Grand Duke, but it should be the Republic of Tuscany, which is as big as Slovenia or many other, Slovakia or the Czech Republic. Why not have a, I'm joking. we won't get that. But more local autonomy must be a good thing for a state which is just, as you said, right, putting itself together. And that doesn't come out. And that's the thing that means that there's disincanto, the lack of being enchanted by your state, to put it mildly. Next one, please. Let's keep going.
What do you think will happen for the future in Italy? Do you think there'll be a point where the EU feels it should intervene to kind of push for reform in institutions, or is that not really?
It's a very good question, and I don't know the answer.
In your opinion?
Obviously, this is the crystal ball gazing part. You know, what will happen? And I always say, well, I'm just a historian, so I can't possibly reply because I don't know what the future holds. But it's an excellent question because that is a possibility. I think it's quite an unlikely possibility. And the whole history of the European Union has been the history of compromise and of terrible moments of crisis, going backwards, going forwards again. It's sort of like a crab. You know, it keeps manoeuvring and finally gets where it wants to go, but it can't go in a straight line. And the Germans would like to see not the end of the European Union, I don't believe that for a moment, but for there to be two speeds for different nations. Those which are most successful economically and are in regola with the parameters that are in, you know, that are obeying the restrictions imposed from Brussels, that they, which would be Germany and Holland, Luxembourg, Finland, 5 or 6, should go ahead economically faster than the others. And they don't trust Italy because Italy has the largest public debt. This came, I didn't have time to deal with it in the 80s and 90s. And they feel that it could be unreliable. But they can't get rid of Italy because if they know that if they try really to split into the European Union, then you'd have the whole of the southern European countries up in arms. And so I think that what we're going to see is continuity rather than radical change. And I think they'll muddle through. And that then none of these nation states will want to break the whole grand experiment up. I don't think Angela Merkel wants to do, she wants to impose new rigid laws, but she doesn't want to break up the European Union. She's a Europeanist, a right-wing conservative, austerity-minded, but she's a Europeanist. And the Italians at the moment are very hostile to Europe. But as I tried to say at the beginning of the lecture, Europe has more than once saved them. So I vote for continuity, but I could be completely wrong. 18 months ago, the euro, all Financial Times, New York Times, the Herald Tribune, the whole lot, the euro has 3 weeks to go before it fails. All over the press, the international press. Goodbye to the euro. And, you know, this from the most expert financial journalists. Not only did it not go anywhere, but it bounced back to being the strongest currency of the moment, and is gaining against the dollar, even against the British pound, against the yen dramatically. And so let's go carefully before we say, that's it. It's got a long way to go. Next one. I know you're all thinking of coffee before your next appointment.
So with the EU, do you find that they are making the politicians here accountable? I mean, I don't see a great system of accountability.
Yeah.
Anyway, the states here, well,
yes and no, I suppose, is the answer. Certainly there's accountability for the deficit within 3%. They've had to do that, they've had to make cuts, the universities cut to pieces, the school buildings are falling to pieces, the sanitary, the health system has been cut back in crucial areas. So they have been obeying. But there are certain things that they can't obey that are totally absurd. Italy's debt is more than 60%, as stipulated by the European Union, of the annual GDP. It's 125%. It's mind-blowing. But they knew that at the time of the Treaty of Maastricht. They knew they were never going to get them down. And this is an absolute farce where you say you have to reduce your debt at the time when everybody's debt is going up. So there are some things that the Italians take with a pinch of salt. And I think the debt is unmeetable. And sooner or later, at Brussels, they'll have to sit round the table and cancel part of the debt. That's what they'll do. Because they can't go on making rules that they know in partenza are quite inapplicable. And deficit is different from debt. That's an absolutely crucial distinction in terms of European political economy. The deficit, you can keep the spending within, bring it down, it can't be more than 3%. The debt, nobody so far knows what to do with it. Not just the Italians, but the Italians is the biggest. Yes?
How do you see the role of the Communist Party in the post-war period? The Communist Party, the PCI?
In many ways, it's a very positive story. Also because as the years went by, they became less and less communist. And that meant that they became more and more integrated into the democratic system, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a political judgment, is a very good thing. And it has to be said also that they, while they were strong, in an extraordinary way managed to involve a very large number of citizens in the political life of the country. They gave people things to think about, and when you sold L'Unità and communist newspapers on Sunday, on the Isolotto estate or something like that, you felt you were building a better society. And the longer they went on, the more the Italian Communist Party was part of it, fully part of Italian democracy. But when it came to the crucial thing, which was reforming the country, because the story I told this morning is a story of failed reform, of almost a failed state, and the archive full of files falling out, etc., as a symbol. When you get to that sort of area, then they weren't very strong. If you say, well, what did you do, Communist Party, in 40 years when you were really quite strong? And they'd be able to say, basically, I think, if they were honest, one thing. They made a very major contribution to the creation of the Italian universalist health system. A man called Berlinguer was not Enrico Berlinguer, but his brother, was responsible, the major person responsible for introducing the welfare, the health system in Italy in 1978. That health system is far from perfect, but it's pretty good still now in the centre and north of the country. So if you get ill, don't get ill in Naples. Try and get on the train and come back to Florence, because it may save your life. And yes, don't get an appendix in the wrong place. I always say And really, I speak from experience, the health system, the public health system in Italy, in the centre and north of the country, is remarkably good. In the mid-90s, the British system was sending patients to Italy to be operated, into Tuscany, because the waiting lists were a tenth of what they were in Britain. So that's something that they did that has stayed, is a monument to them. But in whole other areas, they just weren't strong enough. And above all, I don't think they had the courage, because what they wanted to do was be accepted, because they were ex-communists. So they said, we promise to be very good if you let us into government, and we won't make a fuss at all. And they're thinking about changing the name, and so on and so forth. So they failed there, I think. But the health system was positive.
Question back.
Yep.
Why do you think the government is so unwilling to modernise its citizenship rules?
To modernise its citizenship rules?
Yeah.
I'm glad you raised that. It's been an extraordinarily homogeneous country for too long. It's not like America. I mean, it's all white and it's all Catholic, basically. Even if they don't believe in Catholicism, they'll still go to church occasionally, and when they get married, they'll get married in church. And so when the immigrants arrived, the Italian population was totally ill-equipped to integrate them, to understand, to set up a multi-ethnic society. And this isn't the church's fault. The church actually, even with the conservative, not to talk of this Francis, this extraordinary Francis man, but even conservative popes like Wojtyla, Pope John Paul II, were very clear on the need to welcome the immigrants. But there was a lot in Italian society. We could trace it back to fascism, Mussolini, anti-Semitism. There was a lot in the tradition which was going to say, we don't like these dark-skinned Muslims, and we won't even let them build places of worship. And so I think it is that there is no tradition. Italians were accustomed to emigrate. They weren't accustomed to be there and see the immigrants arrive. And it's a shocking story. It's a really, really horrible story, because thousands of people have died in the Straits of Lampedusa, between northern Africa and Sicily. And it's a great failure. It's not only Italy, it's other Mediterranean countries as well. It's the European Union for doing nothing about it. But in the end, they were in Italian waters, and the boats overturned, and the women and children and everybody else sank and couldn't swim, and the state didn't do anything about it. So it's a shocker. If you wanted to talk about democracy altogether, you'd have to say that was as negative a point as the health system is a positive point. So thank you for that question. Things are changing. And I think second generation immigrants will now get citizenship. Still a battle, but Renzi is in favour of it, to his credit. Coffee.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me.